I'm not wearing a mask right now because I am trying to protect myself. Not from the virus, but from being the target of harassment and assault. Okay, see, it doesn't matter if I'm third-generation Chinese American. This is a mask I cannot take off.
She's a performance artist, comedian, actor, and writer whose work tackles themes of race, sex, and privilege.
She was even a local elected official in LA.
Her acclaimed show, Kristina Wong, Sweatshop Overlord, just finished a very long run, and she's about to launch Kristina Wong, Food Bank Influencer. This is, you guessed it,
Kristina Wong. My name is Nancy Magarill. I'm a singer, songwriter, composer, performer, graphic and web designer.
And I'm Peter Michael Marino, and I'm a writer, producer, creator, performer, and educator.
We are New York-based artists you may or may not have heard of.
And we are here to introduce you to other artists you may or may not have heard of. I just realized I'm doing this podcast from the room that Kristina Wong has slept in many, many times.
Ooh.
Many a house guest.
I don't think you've ever had anybody over, though.
Oh, that's getting a little personal.
No. I've never gone, come to my place in Chelsea.
No, you haven't done that. I feel like the last person who stayed at my place did that. He's not staying here anymore. He used 4 full rolls of toilet paper, 1 box of tissues in 3 nights.
And was that him alone, or did he do that with someone else there? Or
I
do you
don't
think that
know. It
something
was
kinky
really
going on there?
creepy. When I came back to my apartment, he was supposed to be gone, and he wasn't gone because when I opened the door to my apartment, like everything from my coffee table was all on the ground. It looked like someone had broken in. So I was like, oh, I'm going to find a dead body in my bedroom. And no dead body. And then he showed up like an hour later looking bad and he said, yeah, I'm so sorry. I ate some edibles last night and they were just really strong. And I'm like, by edibles, do you mean heroin?
Yeah.
Yeah, what causes you to go through that much toilet paper?
Going through a lot of toilet paper is something that Kristina would be very concerned about because she wants to save the earth.
Yeah, I'm always buying Pete toilet paper.
What kind of toilet paper? I do recycled only, by the way. What do you do? What kind of toilet paper?
Whatever is
are you getting
nearest
him?
to Pete's place. I've sprung for Whole Foods toilet paper before.
That's recycled,
Yeah, maybe TJ's.
I think it makes sense that we're starting this conversation talking about toilet paper in a weird way. We met in 2012 in Edinburgh.
I tell everyone, Peter Michael Marino is the best thing that came out of Edinburgh for me. Everything else was a waste of my time, energy, and soul. And I mean it. I got a friendship with Peter. Everything was so mediocre about that experience. And overwhelming and exhausting and expensive.
Tell us about the show that you were doing at that time.
I was doing a show called Going Green the Wong Way. I had a terrible manager at the time. Going Green the Wong Way, I call it one of my accidental pregnancy shows. I have a few of them, by the way. I was working on a totally different other show and then had done, this guy, Steve Silverman, invited me to do a thing called Slideshow where you get your digital photos or any images turned into Kodak carousel slides, and then you'd sort of narrate through these slides. And so mine was about how I ran a car on vegetable oil. I bought the car in 2008. Is this right? Yeah, and it caught on fire on the freeway.
Oh my God.
A year and a half later. Or maybe did I buy? No, I bought it in 2006, I think. And I kind of found I have to review my lines.
But the onion rings were fantastic.
Wait, did it catch on fire because of the vegetable oil, or is this pre-vegetable oil?
Okay, so it was these hipsters in Silver Lake who had a business called Lovecraft Biofuels. At the time, I had an old Buick that my parents left to me, and someone hit it on the road while it was parked, and it was totaled. So I had enough money to buy a new car, and I saw that these hipsters in Silver Lake were converting diesel Mercedes that were like from the 80s. Some of them, like mine, had 250,000 miles on them already, and converting it to run a vegetable oil. And we were in a war with Iraq. With do you remember this? And I just felt like I'm a hypocrite if I'm against this war, but it's still depending on the oil that is making this war for oil happened. And and what preceded was this nightmare of how to find oil, how to keep this 25-year-old car running. Had so many mechanical issues. It turns out the guy who started this thing was like this total drug addict who thought he was a car engineer. The whole place is out of business now. There was no shortage of lawsuits. They're not even on the road anymore. And so Steve Silverman invited me to do a slideshow, and it was all about this totally terrible experiment in going green. And it went over so well, yet it was such an awful story about how I almost died in this stupid car, which cost so much money. And then I began to look at my history, and I had a whole series of stories of being a young environmentalist. At like 11 or 12 years old, I was in a science contest in middle school, and I chose the topic of the environment, and I realized, oh my God, I have a greater calling. And this is the early 90s, right? So there were not even recycling bins. There was no such thing as a vegetarian. And yet I but there are larger systems that need to happen for us. Like, yes, one person does their part, but my tactic of activism was yelling at all the kids in middle school for using styrofoam, and yet there was no other choice, right? Just berating people constantly. It was like taking my Chinese upbringing and then funneling it towards passive, if not non-passive aggressive, like anger towards everybody. And so anyway, these are the stories in Going Green the Wong Way. Suddenly I had a show, and I had this terrible Hollywood manager. I was with him for 5 years. I never got a single audition or work. He was a Republican. He dated only Asian women. I was not one of them, but that was really creepy. Every time I'd go meet a new girlfriend, and he was like, it all changed. When you do Edinburgh, it all changed. And it didn't. Like, I mean, I met some amazing American artists. It was an experience. I got to see what it was like to tour overseas. I learned, you know what? I don't really like these British people. They're not my audience. I like the way that Americans laugh. So I saw Pete's show, Desperately Seeking the Exit, a solo show about how he wrote Desperately Seeking Susan, the musical, which premiered on the West End and was a flop. And what I got from it was all just the what they say about the UK and America.
Two nations that speak the same language but don't understand each other. I think something like that. Yes,
exactly, right? Like all these references to my show. Like one of my reviews said I was Californian. That's not a compliment. It's not a compliment from these people. So anyway, it's a good fucking show, and it got mixed reviews up there, right? And for me, it felt like. I felt like me touring Going Green the Wong Way about me running a vegetable oil car it just wasn't translating to these Brits and Europeans who don't like have to deal with how I live in Los Angeles and nothing makes sense about our dependence on oil, about our public transportation system is getting better, but it's still a mess.
I never knew that was the thing that's the thing that bonded us.
Wait, can I go back for a second?
Yeah.
Because I think there might be people listening that don't understand what Edinburgh is all about. Can you guys explain that a little bit? Of what happens in Edinburgh and why do artists every year go to showcase their work in Edinburgh?
From what I understand, there is a curated festival called the Edinburgh Theatre Festival, and then around it started the Fringe, which is artists just putting themselves up. I was part of the Fringe.
Yeah, it started after World War II.
Yeah.
It's been around. And it's a marketplace. It's a marketplace. There's like 3,500 shows performing the same show every day at the same time. And then there are people who go to the festival to pick up shows like Six, like Hannah Gadsby, like Stomp.
I didn't know Hannah Gadsby was at Edinburgh.
Yeah, like Fleabag. But you can count the number of hit shows that came out of Edinburgh on two hands. Long-running shows, I'd say. But it's really, for me, it's a place to experience what other artists are doing. And that's exactly what you got out of it, Kristina, was that...
Yeah, I watched 69 shows, folks. I kept on track.
Yeah, you had a morning show, so you had the whole day.
Yes. So our tactic was, instead of competing with the big comedians in the evening, I came with a group from Cal Arts, and we used an old fencing studio, and we had students from this university in Wales who helped us tech. And it was a less expensive way to go than if I went totally by myself. And it gave me a little bit of a team or a little bit of a sense of community. But the tactic was to go up at like 11 or 10:30 a.m.
Yep.
Can't remember. It was early.
11.
And serve free tea and scones and
Yep.
call it free breakfast. and then rather than just flyer the mile, just make friends in line and just hand out the flyer that way. And people's memories are so short, and they've been handed like 200 flyers that, it's tricky. So that was the experience for me. But that's why I also had all this time to watch shows.
I imagine it was also frustrating, not in how much work it was and how little the audience was, but it sounds like you were going there to put your message out to the world, right? About
yeah.
Through your story, we were learning about saving the earth, which is a theme that comes up in lots of your writing and work and chats.
Well, the terrible, creepy manager, he, I guess he had just convinced me that everything changes for you when you're there. And those expectations, I also was exhausted because I had done a run in LA. And by the time I was like so tired by the time I finished LA, and I had like 2 or 3 weeks to turn over to do Edinburgh. And I was like, oh my God, I have to do this all over again and get an audience. And so it was that. And I think this strange expectation that suddenly you just everyone sees you and you tour. And I think I've had the same misunderstanding about how New York works. Like when you bring your show to New York and then you'll play New York, right? Like
we know.
I finally got that. I know. I finally got that experience in 2021 when I premiered, a solo at New York Theater Workshop. But all my New York experiences before that, I think I just put way too much pressure on myself about.
Well, it's hard not to.
Yeah, because it's so expensive. You're so broke most of the time. And so you're always like hedging all your bets. This is it. This is it. This is it.
Well, that's actually one of the things we talk about a lot, about when we all think this is going to be the big one that's going to make it easier. And with the work that you do, because it's so specific and it's so geared towards activism, which is what's so admirable, I would think that it's even harder for you because you're up against that on top of everything else.
Sure. I mean, activism, I can't tell if it's a dirty word anymore in the arts.
No.
Like sometimes it is the word that gets you funding, and sometimes it's not arty enough. And sometimes it reeks for some audiences of I'm going to get screamed at for an hour. So I don't. I don't know.
Which you had not too long ago on your new show.
I'm so cute when I'm yelling. I'm so cute when I'm yelling at people. It's okay. But like to me, like what I consider activism is making culture for change, like with a different to procure a different outcome in life that is more equitable. This is basically also how I explain feminism to most basic men. I go, it just means you want both sides to have equality. They're like, oh, will they do the work? No. But like, and in principle, they think they believe it, right? So yeah, I guess for some people, it looks like burning down police departments and flipping cars upside down. And for others, it seems like just being a nuisance. But I would like to think that what I am doing is trying to change real life outcomes in the work that I do, whether it's on stage or what is often the research work that goes into doing a show, which is usually a lived experience of creating an activist act.
Isn't it also a little bit double-edged, I guess, in that, you create this new piece that's, has activism running through it. And it's like, do I want my audience to be activated and do something about it? Or do I want this show to be the one that gets me on a sitcom?
So when I look at Going Green the Wong Way, I think that was so tame. Like there's so many more radical things I could have said.
But like, how do you separate the activism with the personal? I mean, come on, I know you.
Well, wait, do you want to be on a sitcom?
Of course. I want to sell out so bad. No one is buying, but I also don't know how to sell it to them, And so or obviously, like I swore I've been selling out this whole time, like just be real soft. Like that's why a lot of my shows get categories under comedy. Like I think that's the concession I'm making to make it easier to eat. I think what's easier for the audience to eat. Like, I mean, there are pieces where I could just be howling on stage and like, look at this picture from a genocide. Like that would be so hard for someone to be like, oh, she should be in Friends too. You know, like she should, like, what? I think I've tried to make it as palatable as possible. But, at the end of the day, I think the moment I had many years ago, even way before Going Green the Wong Way, is like, do I want to spend my time doing like cutesy short films that aren't really about anything in the hopes that maybe someone sees it and thinks to put me in a sitcom, or take my power back and just make what I want? And so at the end of the day, I have this thing I made. You can see it. I owned it, and I did something of purpose with my life, right? So
Yeah.
I think I went with the latter, which is stuff that feels like it has purpose. And there are many years when I make a living touring. I tour to a lot of colleges, and it made it really hard for my agents to send me on any auditions because I wouldn't be able to shoot or work it. And some agents I would meet with would say, well, you'd have to stop touring. And I was like, it felt like a big gamble because I was barely getting auditions as it was. Would they suddenly show up more? I'd be at the mercy of somebody else writing these roles. And it's like, do I want to work a waitress job and every so often book 2 lines on a TV
Right.
show? And that is that's my voice in life, right? And be apolitical, so I'm not scary to people, and take that risk, or just put out there shit I believe in. And for me, the biggest challenge is just how to make it easy to eat for an audience. So it's not, like if I am chastising them, it's a very charming comic way of screaming at my audience where they're like, oh, ha, ha, look at her yelling at us. Not like, fuck, we're scared. And now how many dead bodies is she going to show us? So
I was going to say you read my mind because I was thinking like, I just put it together now. Oh, wow. Like I would normally be avoiding an activist because I feel like they're shoving it down my throat, or they're just a downer, or they're just singularly focused on just the one thing. And I think, well, aren't there other things? And you are so not like that. Like, it's incredible that you,
oh, thanks.
we talk about deep things and important things, but it's not like your whole personality. And also, your shows are always fun. I mean, you're great at poking fun at yourself.
I mean, I think that's the best way to do activist art. It's sort of like what Hannah Gadsby is doing as well. Like I was watching the clips that you sent me and the piece on the food bank, and I was so enjoying it because it was fun and it was interesting and it was profound at the same time. And that personally for me is the best kind of art. And I also want to just step back for a second and say, I don't think there's anything wrong with pursuing that kind of work that you love, and then also trying to get on a sitcom and something else, because the audience needs to eat and digest what we're giving, but we also need to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know you get funded somehow, and I want to talk about that a little bit because it seems like you've been very successful at that. But I think that understanding that artists need to make a living, so we can do both. We can do our activist pieces and the things that fulfill us artistically, and then also, as you say, sell out, which is just get paid well on a sitcom or do something, or a movie or something that you could be really good at. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, you can also reframe the sellout as, oh, now I have my platform is a little more visible.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
I can share my message, to Chelsea Handler, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I can sneak it in the conversation about, sex or whatever else, we would expect from a stand-up comic show. Although now she's actually a good example of someone who really just started out with, making fun of Real Housewives, and now she is 100% on board with having a strong political view and changing people's minds. And
she had a turn. I didn't follow her to a T, but I just remember she was kind of this privileged white comedian, and that when I felt like she did refer to other people of color, it felt like they were not human, right? Like these jokes about, were the jokes, was it her or someone else, just jokes about sleeping with black men? And
probably her.
I don't remember that.
That she has come full circle. not so much full circle, but she's
She's realized how to use her powers for good.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Where did this activism come from? I mean, it couldn't just have happened when you were 11. But and you said something about like coming from a Chinese family. Is that a part of Chinese culture, as being activists, or
No, 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 no. No, I mean, for some families, depending like what wave you came over or what your family believes in, that would be, or like what they had to fight. In my case, my grandparents were the first generation to come to America. They were running from communism. My great grandfather was, I think, a statesman and had property and and basically, I guess they got ran out because of communism, and so very much the tactic. Like even now, I might have family members who are like, don't talk about what your grandfather used to do for a living, great grandfather used to do. Don't talk. Like there's
Wow.
so much like, be quiet. Someone's gonna come get us. And there's also at my grandmother's funeral, we were looking at my aunt's tombstone, and my cousin was like reading a Chinese character. She married someone whose last name is Lao, and that's never the last name that my grandmother or my aunt used. And she's like, that says Lao. That's how she's able to recognize it. And my mother's cousin is like, yeah, you're Laos. You've been using a paper son name this whole time.
oh wow,
So there's all sorts of creative paperwork that was done to get Chinese people of my grandparents' generation over here, and a lot of secret keeping around it. And I think for me, being constantly told to not talk about it, not bring stuff up, was sort of the just like a push deep inside me. And it either comes out in me acting out in anger, which sometimes happens, or figuring out how to channel something more productive.
So I want to know like where that flip happened, where all of a sudden you went, okay, I've got to deal with this and I want to talk about this and create art about it.
I loved doing theater in high school because that was not, I was not making my own shows. I didn't even know what I do now existed then. I thought it was that pretty conventional as you audition for a part that someone else
Yeah.
writes. For the most part, all the plays in high school were for white characters. And you were just sort of at the mercy of an open-minded casting system that could see you as the Irish landlady or see you as, the grandmother of a character played by a black actor, But I like that it allowed me to be somebody else because I felt like the world read me as a quiet, kind of harmless, almost invisible person. I have this memory specifically of coming late to my math class, and I had a pass, and I handed the pass to my math teacher, Mr. Siegel, and he's like, "Oh, Kristina Wong's not here today." And I was like, "I'm Kristina Wong. I'm your student. I'm the student."
Oh my God.
I'm handing.
Oh my
I mean, but
God.
like I was his student, and he didn't even recognize me.
Wow.
Like that's how invisible I was, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there was a lot around my identity I had just been taught to repress, like this is just the system, and the more you can pass as white, the more you'll be rewarded as an actor, as a human being, right? Like these are kind of things that were sort of not, it's just very much said indirectly and very clear. It's why my name is Kristina Wong and not a Chinese name, right?
Right.
And so it wasn't until I got to college, I went to UCLA, and in my mind, there was a bunch of Chinese Americans like me who didn't really speak Chinese because their grandparents were the first generation over, and it was like, oh wow, look at all these Asians. And then a lot of them were very politicized, and I didn't even know what Asian American studies was. I was like, how is this a thing? What are we studying? We just what is there to study, right? Like and just to have sort of a both a political language and a history and a sociological framework to think about, how my identity came to be, where so much like self-loathing and resentment came from, all those moments that I had dismissed where someone said something to me because of how they read who I was because of my race and gender first and not who I was. And I just suddenly became super enraged and like, oh my God. And, and wanted to like, I'm going to show everybody. And I didn't know how to direct it. And there was a whole culture then of the late 90s in college of spoken word and people really, really angry poems directed to people who weren't in the room.
Yeah.
And
You
they
were
were
like,
great
that's
poems.
me.
Yeah.
That's
They
my
were great
spot.
poems, but it was also like, why aren't we directing this to the people in the room? You know, like and so combination of witnessing all this and realizing how much freer I felt when I joined an Asian American theater company on campus and I was in a Peter Sellers, who's an opera director. I was in one of his classes making performance art and realizing how much better I felt making my own work versus trying to go to therapy where you basically monologue. So, so I don't know. It was that, and it was seeing sort of the artists that were finding their way to campus as guests. Now I'm that artist that visits campus. And
well, the fact that you sought them out is pretty cool. I never sought those people out, which is why I don't do what you do.
Well, somewhere like Tim Miller, you know, he's a queer solo artist who would, who notoriously, I guess, when he was younger, would often take his clothes off on stage and talk about his queer body. And so I ended up becoming an English major with a double major in world arts and cultures, and I chose that instead of a theater major because at the time you could only throw your undergrad degree completely into theater and nothing else, which is crazy. Like, give people a backup plan here, you know? Like,
right. Especially if it's theater. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was also like, I didn't like the idea of competing. Like, that was what I already didn't like about doing theater in high school was the audition process and competing.
I hate it.
And counting lines and going, oh, I'm here to do 2 lines. And
and now you count lines going, why did I write all this for myself?
It was through this other kind of framework of understanding what theater could be as a lens of social critique, because so many of these plays we did, they weren't really about anything deep. Right. So I just had this crazy idea. I'd be like these artists that visit these colleges because they seem so happy when I would see them. They'd be like getting a drink with their colleague on campus. I didn't realize how, difficult to sustain this is for so long. And when I look at Pete, I'm like, okay, me and Pete, we're like in this live theater, some form, keep making stuff, keep making it happen. But I just had this very naive idea that instead of paying a therapist to listen to me talk about my problems, that I would get an audience to pay me, listen to me talk about my problems. And because it felt so cathartic whenever I performed, that might as well get paid. That would be the ultimate validation. And also because I felt like when I saw solo work, what I liked about it is like, it's not the kind of work you have to audition and get someone else's approval to do. You make it, it's weird if you're disabled, if you are gay, if you're, like whatever's happening, it is so specific to you. And that's what makes it so special. And in ways it felt like there were no rules. Like I hated like classes that were like, make your own work. Okay, bring in writing. And I'm like, no, I bring in movement and gestures. And like, I don't just sit alone at a computer, write on a page. And, like I'm much more interdisciplinary. Like I'm very La Mama. You know what I'm saying?
You're very La Mama.
Well, let's talk about what La Mama is, because the listeners may not know.
Nancy, you're being me this week. I love it.
I know.
Oh, I'm usually let's dig deeper.
So La Mama, which I only got to visit later in my 20s, but it was infamous, was experimental theater space where the word now is devised, right? But that didn't exist then. And I was like, I don't know how to describe this, but it's not a straight play. And it's work that's interdisciplinary. There's movement. Maybe there's a script. So our equivalent here in LA was Highway's performance space. And I basically would usher the shows there and see them for free. And that was like my graduate school. Just watching all these Butoh dancers and naked performance artists and immersive experiences and stuff. And never seen anything like this before. And I just was like, this is it. This is so much better than scripted plays. And it's weird because only in the last few years have I kind of come back to the scripted play. And honestly, in these last 2 years since becoming a Pulitzer finalist, like I hardcore watch a lot of plays now. But for a while, I was only watching weird shit because it was free, cheap. You could just walk in. Like I wasn't good at like, oh, I gotta go to the Ticketmaster and go buy a ticket,
You are really good about seeing theater. Like, you come to New York on a pretty regular basis, either for meetings or for shows, and
Yeah.
you always plan ahead and go to see lots of shows. And by the way, I am going to see Yellowface thanks to
Oh,
your
Oh,
recommendation.
good.
I
I'm
so want to see that.
glad.
I heard it was
Yes,
fantastic.
I'm going on Wednesday. I'm seeing
Yeah.
Yellowface in the afternoon, and I'm seeing Big Gay Jamboree that night.
Oh
Oh, that's so
God.
great.
Is that the same group that did Titanic?
Titanic, yes.
Oh, that's
Titanic.
It's
right.
this
Yeah, I
it's the
read the
same
article about
writer,
that.
and they've got Margot Robbie as the producer.
Oh, interesting.
So this little tiny show playing at the Orpheum Theater is now featured in the New York Times and on CNN. So get
I'm not surprised.
Margot Robbie on your side. But something about, like, she saw Titanic just, as a regular person, and the creator singer saw her in the audience and was like, "Oh my God." And then she wrote to her and said, "Thanks for coming to my show." And then she said, "What else are you working on?" And she was like, "Well, I'm working on this movie. It's about someone who gets trapped in a musical." And that was the end. And then Margot Robbie contacted her shortly after Barbie became everything.
Wait, is that what this Big Gay Jamboree is about?
It's not someone trapped in a musical. So then Margot said, let me know what you need. I want to produce the show. And that's what's happening, which is really
Well, that's
cool.
Schmigadoon also. If you
Yeah.
guys haven't seen Schmigadoon, it's hilarious.
And it's also Kristina Wong's new show. She is trapped in her own musical while
Yeah.
talking about food banks, interestingly enough.
Jesus.
Is that the theme of it? Is that you're trapped in a musical?
Well,
Or are you just saying?
metaphorically.
Oh, okay.
And
I'm
she
like,
has
The
written
audience might be
herself.
trapped more than me.
You've written yourself a musical without knowing
I
it.
wrote myself a musical without knowing it. Yeah, it's so funny because it was not the format at all I thought this was going to take. And most shows I get really ambitious. I'm like, it's going to be an immersive experience. And that's usually when I have no script and I go, oh, that's okay. The set will do the work and the audience will be the actor. But yeah, it's Kristina Wong, food bank influencer. And I don't know how to start the story because I didn't talk at all about my last show. But basically, in 2019, I became introduced to a non-traditional food bank in my neighborhood, which I'd passed all the time. And it just looked kind of like this messy warehouse discount store. And I walked in one day and it turns out it was... I didn't even know until after I left and had to look it up online. It was a food bank that acts like a store where you buy the donations for very cheap or you volunteer for them and you get an excessive amount of food. And so much of it is so that the shame that you would normally feel of going to a pantry or a food bank where you're rationed out how many items you can get, you just feel is abundant. So I couldn't stop talking about this place. I had no personality anymore. And I lived for this food bank in the pandemic because there's no excitement really. I mean, there was the wrong kind of excitement all during the pandemic that was mostly just like, what tragic, terrible thing will befall us today. But like seeing what kind of crazy giveaways were at the food bank was like the most exciting thing. And I became really excited about sharing it and researching emergency food, and everything just suddenly felt so possible because I was running a mutual aid sewing group for masks. And so a lot of the stuff from this food bank ended up going to the Navajo Nation and all these other communities that we were already getting masks to. And so when ASU Gamage, located in Tempe, Arizona, asked me to spend 3 years with them and work on a new piece, I was like, you are in the same state as the Navajo Nation. They asked me about making them a food bank. I'm going to make a food bank. I'm going to call the show Kristina Wong, Food Bank Influencer. I did not make anybody a food bank. As it turns out, that's a lot of work. It's a forever commitment. And it's a Band-Aid for larger systemic issues. So I am happy, at least, that the direction I'm headed in with this show is pointed towards thinking about issues of food justice, shame, what a food desert is, how bureaucratic emergency food systems can be, and why is it that we keep going after hunger by throwing food at it and not anti-poverty policy?
Wow.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. But I believe you always posted at the end of the year how much money you spent on food that year.
Yeah, that's where it started.
Give us an example of how much money you would spend on food in a year for yourself.
Before 2020, I never tracked it, but I'm sure it was in the thousands.
Right.
And then eating out much more.
Right.
But then when you started tracking it, it was like under $300 a year, right?
Yeah, under $50 a month. So that was under $600 a year. And that was initially when I leapt into this in 2019, not even thinking it was a show. It was because we're so exhausted from the years 2016 to 2020. Wonder why. I couldn't take more plot. My life couldn't take more plot. And I was like, I was just watching unboxing videos and watching people go, this is how I'm going to feed my family on $4 today, and like it was
Wow.
actually really fascinating to watch, like this, like some of it was out of necessity or they were just constantly on budgets, and it was really cool how creative they were, and maybe I was developing a really fucked up relationship with food because I'm on tour. I just wasn't good at meal planning, and so I come home and all the food be rotten or I buy too much. But when I was watching these people like really budget, I was like, initially it was just me trying to be like these influencers that I had seen on YouTube,
Right.
and then which is
Oh,
why the show was
that's the
Food Bank
title.
Influencer,
Right.
right? Because I was like, wow, I can do unboxing videos, I can make all the low plot level stuff that I keep watching during these depressing times.
What is unboxing?
Unboxing is it's just basically people get something and they don't know what it is or haven't seen it yet, and they open it up for the camera. So maybe they buy a mystery box on eBay and they'll read the description to the camera, and then they open the box and then they react to it.
A lot of kids do it. It's like kids
Yeah.
opening a new toy and showing us, oh, this is how it's packaged and this is how you put it together and
Yeah.
this is how it doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
The appeal is like Christmas, like watching
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
open their presents over and over again. And I was really into watching people buy like mystery palettes and just open up the palettes, right? And I was like, I got into that for a while, like, oh, I'm gonna buy a mystery palette of clothes. And then I was like, what the fuck am I gonna do with all these like elastic waist twill pants that I got stuck with? But like anyway, so that strange detail is sort of what led me to just looking at grocery stores differently, because it was like I just began to think, man, maybe I'm not good at food, or maybe food that's expired. Like every time I'd see expired food, I go, God, I failed. God, I'm such a
Yeah.
loser. Now I just eat expired food and I'm just alive. It's fine. I just didn't understand how much I feared food after a while. I just thought, oh, this is someone else's job to cook this, because obviously I'm not good at taking care of this. It's like I'm getting over my fear. Like I have some plants, and there are a bunch that are dead, and I'm still watering them. I'm like in denial.
Live.
Oh my God. I just had this vision of your next show is going to be about how like you lived off the land for a year in a mud hut that you made out of recycled tires and Coca-Cola cans.
No, we're not doing that.
I know I sound like, oh, I'm dreading this, but actually that sounds really good. I want to know about what it's like to be in the running for a Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
This is like a question I've never asked anybody.
Let me tell you about the first time I applied was for the 2016 Pulitzer, and my friend Brian Feldman, who's friends with you, Pete, was like, you can just apply for it. And we pulled it up on the web, and we were like, $75, and you can apply to be you can be a Pulitzer contender. Like just being close to
Wow.
that name felt crazy. And
This is-
so
This is so you. This is so both of you.
You don't know this story?
I-
You don't know this story? Pete?
I don't know. I don't think
Oh
I
my
know
God.
the story. But it's
So-
so Brian and so you. Continue.
So Brian is a very conceptual performance artist, and his entry was something called Dishwasher, which was just a set of directions. And it's basically a piece that he's done at fringe festivals all over the country in people's homes, where you buy a ticket. There's only one ticket available, and he shows up at your house, he washes your dishes, and it could take up to an hour. And the idea is maybe you have like some friends over, you have some food out before he shows up, and then you just hand him some material to cold read, and he reads a monologue, the phone book. It could be I think he did the entirety of the vagina monologues once, and then he asks, so am I a better dishwasher or actor? And then he takes that answer and records it. So it was a 2-page description of this performance. And then I turned in my show, The Wong Street Journal, and my mother got so into it. My mother was like, because she'd only seen The Wong Street Journal all year. And so she's like, you could totally win. You totally get this. I could tell my friends that that my daughter's a Pulitzer winner. And I'm like, it's going to go to Hamilton. No, you don't know that. You don't know that. So anyway, so when it's announced, the Pulitzers are put on by Columbia College. It was their 100th year. I managed to get a press pass because I was in New York, and it's only open for the press, and it's also live streams in New York. And I wrote an essay for NBC Asian America about this whole thing. But no one knew, a contender is also in the audience. And my then partner was filming me react to not winning it and not being a finalist. and Brian was in Orlando texting me, turn to the right, and he was screenshotting me in the audience at this announcement. And I prepared 3 speeches. One was the acceptance speech if I won, one was a concession speech, and one was a speech if I was a finalist. And so I stood outside and live streamed, delivered 3 speeches, all 3 speeches.
You two are
And then I
hilarious.
wrote an essay about how the first Asian American woman to win a Pulitzer in drama was not me. So fast forward to 2022, I'm going to go eat with Glenn from the food bank and some people in Chinatown in LA, and Brian texts, "Good luck," and I'm like, "On what?" He's like, "They're announcing the Pulitzers." I'm like, "Shut up," and I'm like, "They're not gonna do anything. Come on, I'm a solo show. I'm from LA. I have no master's degree. Like, why?" And my phone starts blowing up at lunch. Going,
Wow.
congrats, Pulitzer finalist. And I ran out of the restaurant screaming. I basically couldn't focus the rest of the week.
Are you like an ambassador now? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I'm wondering what that means.
No, I'm not an ambassador. I mean, I won't shut up about it. It's just a fancier title. It just shuts people up, you know, like.
Yeah. Well, it's very impressive.
Hey.
And it's not just the Pulitzer. You've won a Doris Duke Award, a Doris Duke Artist Award,
Yes,
a
that was
Guggenheim
huge.
Fellow, which is pretty huge.
Thank you.
You know, are you able through any of these to be able to
modest?
fund your art?
Mm-mm.
To be modest.
Yes. Modesty, no. Yeah. I would like to say that for now, I think I'm finally somewhat catching up with having a healthier. We call it just means. I think for many years.
Well,
it was
I've seen you like still acting like you're waiting for your next $10 from your box office payout, even after you received the funding. Like it's still in you
I
to
still
be
have it.
frugal and to
oh yeah,
not like you're not going on like extravagant trips. You're not.
Listen, I still put the toilet paper from the hotel room in my.
suitcase.
I still,
it's just your DNA.
I still am using every coupon I have. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't take the you can take the struggle off the artist, but you can't take. I don't know what I'm saying.
Was it my heart-stirring message? My vision for making Koreatown a safe haven for all immigrants, my mission to protect the most vulnerable. It was all that, but it was especially my ability to pass as Korean!
I mean, what I learned from being an elected official, which we didn't even get into,
It's in your intro. It's in your intro.
But it's hysterical that you did
like
that.
We're all different versions of performance artists all the time, and running a campaign. You know, it was neighborhood councils and nothing office, but running that office, trying to act like I knew what I was doing in meetings, trying to like be tough to developers at meetings. It was all the same.
And did you do it as performance art, or were you actually really trying to run?
I really was trying to run, and the impetus was in 2016. What happened in 2016? Yes. I just didn't know what my role as a satire maker was anymore, and it felt like artists and politicians had switched jobs. So like the moment I had is I just woke up one day and I don't know, it was the Paris Accord, some executive order that Trump signed. And I was just like, Jesus, like he was just signing nonstop executive orders, remember? Yeah. And I was just like, fuck, I'm just going to run for office. And then I went, that's it. That's the piece. I'm going to run for office, research how to run it. And the show will look like a campaign rally. And I didn't know what I was going to run for. I went through this this is a lot of different shows. I go, okay. And very quickly was like, it's very expensive to run even a joke campaign in any kind of major political office in a city like Los Angeles. Like, do I want to burn thousands of dollars and lots of time? Ultimately, no, I want to be making my work as an artist. Yeah. So I found myself, my friend, basically Alex Jones was trolling me for my kids' web series, Radical Cram School. I went to my neighbor Angie's house. This is before I ran for office. And she gave me something to eat. So I was upset. It was an edible. It was a marijuana edible. I woke up. I got so high. And when I woke up, I was filed to run for a local election with her. And So goes the story.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
We're back to edibles.
Christina does not do.
I'm not good. Mm-mm.
I mean,
Nope.
back then,
Nope.
you definitely didn't. You never did any mind-altering anything.
No, not good.
I
at
think
this.
that's the theme of this, and the moral of this podcast is no edibles. Don't do edibles.
Don't do edibles.
Hey, thanks for checking us out. Links to today's guest can be found in the show notes.
Don't forget to subscribe, like us, rate us, and tell all your friends about arts and craft.